I was one of these kiddos that actually came into the world knowing that our soul continued. At 5 years old, I write about this specific moment that's vivid to me. It's this vivid memory of standing downstairs at my mom's house, and I'm looking at my grandmother's. There was like an antique buffet downstairs that was my grandma's, and I'm looking at it, and I just have this little conversation in my head about, oh, I don't remember being born. And oh, yeah, that's because we're never born and we never really die. We just keep going. Like the tipping point's already happened. We just can't see it yet because
Right.
our lens of how we're experiencing reality is so clouded and conditioned.
Hmm.
And so part of what we're doing right now is trying to break that conditioning.
I want to welcome everybody back to another episode of The Soul Inspired. Today we have Stephanie James with us. She wears many hats. She's a psychotherapist, a transformational coach, also a filmmaker, the author of a book called Your Big Fat Juicy Life, and an international show host and a podcast host of Igniting the Spark. So I'm really excited. You do wear many hats, Stephanie. I'm really happy that you come on the show and I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Joe. It's such a joy to be here with you.
I try to start by saying, first of all, were you always this way? I go back to childhood and look at, I always say the little name, little Stephanie, and I try to find out a little bit about who you were and your influences, and it could be spiritual, religious upbringings, anything like that. I just try to get a little deep dive as to who you were growing up. If we could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I write about this, Joe, in my book, Your Big Fat Juicy Life and Everything After, because I was one of these kiddos that actually came into the world knowing that our soul continued. At 5 years old, I write about this specific moment that's vivid to me. It's this vivid memory of standing downstairs at my mom's house, and I'm looking at my grandmother's. There was like an antique buffet downstairs that was my grandma's, and I'm looking at it, and I just have this little conversation in my head about, oh, I don't remember being born. And oh, yeah, that's because we're never born and we never really die. We just keep going. And so I
Mm.
had, this very distinct thought. And then interestingly, one of my influences, and, I grew up in this very normal, my father was a, economics professor at CSU. My mother owned a florist shop. And yet we had this housekeeper that would come on Tuesday, Thursdays, and this wonderful Latina woman who I just loved. She gave the best hugs ever. I would just like melt into her body. Um, but I always wanted to be hanging out with her. And so when she would be ironing my dad's shirts, I'd sit down on the couch with her and she would start telling me stories about how she had taken care of my mom and my mom's brother, my Uncle Chuck, in past lives.
Oh, wow.
And here she is, like this Catholic woman. I don't even know if Catholics believe in past lives,
Mhm.
but she was sharing with me all these different times and other lives she remembers. So I remember never thinking that was weird. That just seemed kind of normal. And, for years, Joe, I didn't talk about this because as a psychotherapist, you just don't put this stuff out there. And
Mhm.
even my first two books, my last book was Becoming Fierce. And even though I hinted a little bit about this really much deeper spiritual life, I didn't share a lot, because most of us don't want to be compartmentalized or categorized or, oh, that person's crazy. And I feel like it's so important because as I was doing research for my book, I found out, 73% of people that were polled have had these kind of experiences that I started having very young, like 6 years old, where these, I don't know what else to call them. I called them energy imprints. But like these lights would show up outside of my bedroom door. And there was one tall one and two shorter ones. And that happened throughout my childhood. I wasn't afraid. They wouldn't come in, they just stand at the door. And it was kind of the outline, if you will, of these three people. And I could write that off as like, oh, maybe I was a little girl and dreaming until my oldest daughter was 10 years old and staying with my mother. And my mom still owned the same house that I grew up in. And Acacia came home and she's like, Mom, Mom, there were these three light people that were standing outside of my door. And I had a girlfriend with me, and I said, "Oh my gosh." I'm like, "Acacia, hold on." And I whispered to her, "I had this happen. There was one big one and two little ones." And I said, "Honey, tell me about it." And she's like, "Well, there were these two little ones and this one big one." And it's like these are the kind of things
Wow.
that's like you just can't make this up, right?
Right, right.
Um, and so I've had that kind of blessed life through my life continually on that spiritual level. I did go
Mhm.
through an incredible heartache and explosion of a really golden childhood at 13 when my father told my mom he was in love with my best friend's mom.
Wow.
And the family like exploded, and this really beautiful childhood really was ruined for my brother and I and my mom. And so, probably for the next 15 years after that, I was a really hurting kid, a really hurting young woman.
Mhm.
So I think I come by wanting to help others, wanting to be a conduit for health and healing and as much love as possible to come, to me and through me as a conduit of that
Mhm.
from those experiences. So I'm kind of giving you the mixed bag here, but that's kind of a little bit of the history in a nutshell.
No, I love that. And also just I was gonna say because it was your daughter that's seen these, she wouldn't have overheard you talking about these lights, these outlines, right? And it's really interesting. I have personal experience with that as well from a past relationship where the person I was with would wake up in the middle of the night and see light outlines
Mhm.
of spirit and this happened all the time. And then there'd be a confirmation of it. I remember one time she had seen somebody with a hat, and I said, "Oh, it must be my uncle. It must be my uncle. Maybe I don't know." We were having conversation, and the next moment, my grandfather's wife, second wife, called me on the phone, and I had never talked to her, and she thought she was calling my father at the time, and I said, "No, it's Joey. It's Joe. And she said, "Oh my goodness." And immediately my intuitive said, "Oh, it was my grandpa," because my grandpa had passed too. But the reason I'm saying this is she had just told me the story. I got up off the couch to walk down the stairs and the phone rang. It was that quick. And what that does is confirmation. We talk about this many times where there's these signs that happen, but if we're not aware of the signs, we kind of overlook them, and then we're still questioning life. But once you start opening your mind to the signs, it's incredible. Like life gets really interesting, right? So you somehow in your young, free-spirited wisdom were okay with seeing these things and you know weren't afraid of them. A lot of kids they get fearful of these
Mhm.
things. So you somehow must have been like, okay, maybe like you said, the influence of I think you said it was a housekeeper or someone. I'm sorry if I
Yeah,
got that
yeah.
wrong.
Mhm.
That was ingraining that in you that, oh yeah, there's a possibility, I was in a past life with, and when you hear that young, you go, oh, okay, that's a possibility then. And that's why children are so like they're like sponges. When you tell them things, take note of what you're saying because they're gonna take it in different, right? So that's fascinating.
Well,
Yeah.
and I love this because you and I have a parallel here too as well.
Mhm.
Um, when you're talking about your grandpa coming in, what is amazing too. So my daughter Acacia is the Greek word for immortality, and it's the tree of life in Africa. So when I named her that, I had no idea that she was going to be actually the one to teach me about the true meaning of immortality.
Mm.
And when she was 4 years old, I was a single mom, and I write about this story in the book. I was in the bathtub and my mom called. So little Acacia grabbed that. This is back in like 1992. So she grabs the huge old portaphone and brings it into the bathroom. And I'm talking to my mom, and my 46-year-old aunt, Gwen, had been struggling with breast cancer. And that morning had gone in for exploratory surgery because she hadn't been doing well. And my mom called to tell me that when they opened her up, the cancer was all through her torso, just everywhere. And so they just said, there's really nothing we can do. And they sewed her back up and let my mom know she had about 3 months to live.
Wow.
And so mom tells me that. And I put down the phone and I'm crying, and little Acacia wanders in to the bathroom, and she's like, "Mama, why are you crying?" And I said, "Well, Acacia, Mama just doesn't want anyone to die." And she just looked at me really funny and said, "Mama, we never die."
Mm,
And I just kind of laughed and I said, "Well, okay, yeah, I know we go to heaven, even though we didn't go to church or we didn't talk about heaven." And she just looks at me and she's like, "Mama, there's no heaven." And she says, "When I was a light up in the sky with God," and then she stops. And here's where she says, "Do you remember your other mother, Dorothy?" And I'm like, "Oh my God, my other mother, Dorothy? That was my grandmother who died right before I turned 13 years old."
wow.
And my grandfather married the year after to a woman named Lucille. So Grandma Seal was the only person that Acacia knew. We
Mm,
didn't talk about my grandmother because we didn't want to be disrespectful. We didn't have pictures of my grandmother. Here we are 12 years later, and Acacia says, "Your other mother, Dorothy, her light was in the sky with me. And so God put some of her light in my light, and I got to come down and be your daughter."
mm.
And I was
Wow.
like, "Okay, all right." I mean, talk about a game changer.
Yeah, absolutely.
I called my mom back, and it was my mother's mom, and we were just, we were in tears again because we both knew, it's like out of the mouths of babe, that is real,
Right.
of course. And the interesting thing was years and years later, um, actually about 8 years later, we were all at a Thanksgiving dinner. And my grandfather says, and we never told him, we didn't want to, he wouldn't
Mhm.
have believed that, I don't think. But we're sitting there, and I have to tell you, Acacia was not like my grandmother personality wise. She's introverted. She's an artist, very, I mean, incredibly talented, a brilliant woman, but has some social anxiety. And my
Yeah.
grandmother's much more like me, like doesn't know a stranger. Like, Joe, if she found out it was your birthday, she'd be like, "I just met you, but I'm baking you a cake." I mean, she's just
Right.
that
Right.
person.
Yeah.
And we're at this Thanksgiving dinner, and my grandfather says, "I think Acacia's the most like Dorothy out of all my grandchildren." And he had 26
Oh, wow.
with grandchildren and great
So,
grandchildren,
so
and
that's
we're all like, "What?"
wow.
So,
It's
the power
fascinating.
of him seeing
Hmm.
that love of his life, which my grandmother was in her.
Hmm. Yeah. No, that's fascinating. You said something I want to jump on because you said that your daughter had mentioned there's no heaven.
Hmm.
So I I would think that maybe what's happening there, because there are people who have a lot of NDEs that I talk to
Hmm.
who definitely go into a heavenly realm.
Yeah.
And um, I sometimes wonder if, depending on what has been told heaven is, it's interpreted different. Like your daughter may have been interpreting what she's been told heaven was as to what heaven is. What is your thoughts around that? Like, why do you think she said that?
Well, I think it's interesting. Maybe that was just her own remembrance or her own experience. I
Hmm.
really do agree with what you're saying. I interviewed Stephen Simon, who was the Academy Award winner of the film What Dreams May Come,
Wow.
with Robin Williams and Cuba Gooding Jr. And so I interviewed him for my show, and then I also interviewed him again for the book because that what you are saying is what he wrote about. That film is about what you imagine heaven or purgatory or whatever that is what you're going to experience.
Right. Yeah. And when we talk about, see, I highly believe that. I also believe that that's why when they talk about the power of suggestion and the things that we do in this life, I think it bleeds through, but at a very slow vibration. It's more difficult to create in this world, but we can do it. That's why you see people who have success create success. This is why we have why these people exist, right? That are these leaders that are helping people get to that point. But I believe on the other side, from what I've seen, and not what I've seen, but what I've talked about with people, is that it's an immediate response. It's you're creating. your own heaven. So what you envision heaven to be like, you'll have that, which sounds amazing. But you know what I mean? So it's just different. But at the same time, where I get, and I'm just gonna say this because
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people I've spoke with when they say heaven and they're in heaven, they talk about the blades of the grass being alive and the mountains being alive. Like everything is alive in comparison to here. Almost like this is gray in comparison. It's almost like a
Mm-hmm.
gray overtone of what a heavenly realm would really be like. And then I think to myself, is this influence? One of the reasons I start my podcast episodes is what is your background? Is I'm trying to see what was your influence. And then we move
Mm-hmm.
into an experience someone's had. And does that experience overlap? And sometimes they do, and other times they don't.
Right.
So I feel like I'm this deep researcher of people's spiritual experiences, near death experiences, out of body experiences, and I'm finding some commonalities, but I also
Mm-hmm.
see some things that are common amongst different types of people, whether they're Christian, Catholic, atheists, you name it. There's experiences they have that seem to be common.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, I understand what you're saying, and I do believe that we have this ability to create on the other side of whatever it is we feel and see. But I still wonder, I still have wonder around, is there an essence about us that is, you know, why does Earth look the way it does? Sometimes I feel like we've brought that over,
Mm-hmm.
a bird in the sky, a beautiful tree, a beautiful waterfall. Where did that come from? Because we've incarnated and now here we are creating what we see. But it gets really deep. So I don't want to go too deep with it,
No,
but yeah.
no, but I love this conversation, Joe. I really do because, in over 30 years of being in the mental health field and working with all walks of life of people,
Hmm.
um, I my sense of it for myself is that heaven or hell is right here and now. It's in between our ears, and how we can create heaven for ourselves or we can create hell for ourselves by what we're focusing on, what we're putting our attention to, what we're noticing. um
Hmm.
Moving here to Santa Fe, I live on 5 acres. For the first time, I live in the country. And so I walk on these dirt roads with my dog in the morning. There's mountains all around, and it is heaven for
Hmm.
me. I mean, it
Hmm.
truly, I'm like in love. I'm in awe with the sky. I can't even tell you, I'm burning up every ounce of memory I have on my phone with these incredible, gorgeous pictures of the
Right.
sky. And I feel very connected to the land in a way I didn't when I lived in Colorado. There's something really deep here and very, I would say, mystical about living here. So I think we can experience heaven states
Hmm.
right here and right now. I
Right.
feel like I experience that a lot. I feel really blessed. And as a scuba diver, I experience that every time I'm under the sea.
Hmm.
It's like that to me is pure bliss, pure heaven. So I don't know that
Yeah.
we have to die to get there.
Right. I love that. I like how you said it like that. I uh I was thinking about two thoughts just now. You obviously have written, it's called Your Big Fat Juicy Life. It's the book that you've written. When you were doing, because did you start into psychotherapy in your early adulthood? Like, is that when did you get into that right away? And because you mentioned that, and you had said that you had these spiritual experiences through your life, but it's a really gray area. I have social work background, so I
Mm,
worked in mental health with youth and had many deep conversations. And I also worked in a men's mission with homeless people and people on the streets. And some of the conversations would overlap psychosis into spirituality. And I remember the conversations and being confused a little bit and being like, well, how do I decipher the difference here? How do I see the difference? And, you know, I also have conversations, deep conversations with people on a daily basis around their spiritual experiences. And I can't help but think to myself, if I had this conversation 50 years ago, would I be able to do what I'm doing? Or would I be in a white room?
Right, right.
Do you know what I mean by that?
I
So,
do. I do.
so we're in a very funny place in our evolution where there is definitely mental health issues out there, 100%. I've
Mm-hmm.
seen it
Mm-hmm.
firsthand. But then there's also this spiritual side that seems to be coming up to the surface way faster and quicker than we've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always been the type of person that steps back and I observe as if I'm looking from the outside and I'm watching more podcasts coming out all the time, conversations around this kind of stuff coming out. There's more things even coming out from space and from UFO. Like we can go really down some crazy areas, but it's becoming more and more common in conversation.
Mm-hmm.
It's no longer looked at as if you're crazy. And I'm wanting your take around this a little bit. And I don't know what the deep question is I have is, but how do we I guess move forward as these changes are happening without thinking it's something like we're going crazy? Because there's definitely a lot
Yeah.
of changes happening.
There are. And I think, podcasts like yours, podcasts like mine, giving a voice to these things, and I talk about it a lot in my book, the importance of us starting to have these conversations more and more so that people do feel like they have a voice, so that it's more normalized because people are having these experiences, and in my private practice, and I've been in private practice almost 20 years now, and I feel like I cannot begin to tell you. And some of the stories are in the book with permission from clients. But so often as a therapist, I'm hearing people's encounters with, you could call it 5D,
Hmm.
people's encounters with a dead relative or a loved one, or, and so I feel like what's interesting, and the book talks a lot about death because part of it is about how we can befriend death and start to have a relationship with it as not the ending, but just the next chapter in our book
Hmm.
of eternity. And when we
Right.
do that, what it really does is it allows us to be more fully in this present moment. And then this present moment becomes very sacred. If you want to talk about, creating heaven on earth, it's when we're not in our fear response.
Hmm.
And, and I want to tell you, it was so interesting because the way that this book came to fruition was very wild. It was a year ago in March. I had Neil Donald Walsh on my show. And for people that don't know who that is, it's the man who wrote Conversations with God, which sold over 5 million copies. He's been like one of the top 100 spiritual influencers of our time. And so we get on and we start having, just like you and I, Joe, did this kind of pre show conversation, but we can't get to the show. We just keep rolling the tape and we're just talking and talking this very personal level and laughing and having this wonderful conversation. And all at once, and you can see it. I love it that I have the video of this. You see him get the download and he just looks at me and he goes, Stephanie, you're going to write your next book and you're going to start tomorrow morning. And this book's going to have a global impact and I'm going to endorse this book. And I was
Wow.
like, okay. Like I felt it. I got chills through my entire being. I knew that that was the truth. Of course, I woke up the next morning and started. This book came through in 6 weeks, a little under 6 weeks. My
Wow.
first two books were 9 months each, like birthing a baby. And then the wild and magnetic thing that started happening is people started showing up to be a part of this book. So,
Mm.
like Wayne Dyer's daughter, Sage Dyer, she and I had had several conversations. And so she and I have a conversation again. I said, I want you in the book. We start talking. After that conversation, she's like, I got to introduce you to my mom. My mom has had these experiences with dad since he's died. And I think, you need to meet her. And so it was that. It was Suzanne Giesman, Ariel Ford, again, Stephen Simon. These people just started, coming out of the woodwork to offer their experience, their
Wow.
experience, their expertise, again, to add evidence that this isn't just in our minds. This isn't just, oh,
Mm.
I had this wild dream. Um,
Right.
and that people all over, as you just said, all over are having these experiences more and more frequently. So I think, to come back around to your question, I think it's that we really start having these conversations.
Mm.
One of the things, in the book I talk about that was wild is about a year ago, a friend of mine was going to what are called death dinners. And a death dinner was literally you get all dressed up and you go out for a gourmet meal. And the topic of the night is death, but not death as this morbid topic.
Right.
Death as like this portal. Death is like this, like, and
Hmm.
not about anybody wanting to hurt themselves, or it's not encouraging anyone to want to end their life. And I want to be really clear about that. It's just saying we don't have to live in that fear. There's another way through. And as we talk about it, it dispels the fear. As we talk about it, it becomes common language. And
Hmm.
that's what I want to see, Joe. I mean, that's what I
Oh,
want. That's part of my hope is that we can start having these as just mutual, open conversations.
yeah, and I love all that. And you touch on a few really important things. I mean, even if you look into our ancient history, different cultures at different times, we seem to go through waves. And I'm hoping we're going through a better one because a lot of things going on right now, as we know, and
Mm-hmm.
especially lately. And I always talk about you don't know the light unless you see the dark. There's different things that I could say about that. But like we need to rise up, clearly. But there have been times where there were civilizations and cultures that I don't want to say celebrated death, but kind of. They didn't welcome it and make it come faster, but when it happened, it was a celebratory moment. It was a moment of the next thing, which tells me, you know, we're glued to our phones these days. We're glued to distraction. And I sometimes look to our past and think, how much more were they aware at times? Because if they had a lot more time to sit in stillness and have
Mm-hmm.
extraordinary moments that come up in their life, you know, now I don't know what was talked about. I do what I've talked about this experience I had myself on a couple episodes where I grew up with severe anxiety around death because I started having these strange moments of realizing, looking at my hand and saying, "What is this?" And this was in my teen years. And even as a child, looking around and thinking, "Why are people mean to each other?" I never felt like aligned here correctly. And so
Mm-hmm.
as I became more fearful of that, oh, this existence is ending, I became obsessed with NDEs. At a point in my life, I had had some success with my music, and I, for whatever reason, went down this rabbit hole of not feeling appreciated for for whatever reason it was, and I kind of went down a dark kind of path a little bit. I didn't do anything, but I just didn't feel like anybody was supporting me, and I had a mutual moment with in the relationship I was in at the time where we seen an apparition of a hand appear on a window because she had been used to seeing those types of things. She's seen spirit her whole life, things like that. It was more of a like almost like an exciting moment for her, whereas I lost my mind. I
Mm-hmm.
ran to the bathroom, grabbed the hair dryer, plugged it in, tried to create this. I thought it was condensation on a window. I was like, that's why I mentioned the question I had about how do we decipher, how do we not go kind of crazy over this experience? But it was an odd moment, and even talking about it makes me feel uncomfortable. So this is what I mean, and how do people listening, if they've had these experiences, come to terms with these experiences? And I guess you're right. I mean, hearing other people talk about it, and this is why this show is so important to let people know that, because someone might say, "Oh, Joe, you were just tired," but it was a co-experience.
That's just it.
It
Right.
was someone else that I can verify it with. And I think that happened for me that way because I know myself. I'm right down the middle. I'm a believer and a seeker all at the same time. So I'm the person
Uh-huh.
that needs that verification. If I don't have that, I would tell myself I needed some coffee or something. Like something went off. I was half asleep and I was dreaming.
I do think what we've been talking about is exactly the remedy that we listen to shows like this, we read books like this, we have these conversations, and I do have what came up for me when you were saying that, when you're saying like if there's more than one person that experiences it, then you're like, okay, this gives validity to this.
Hmm.
And it reminded me of, my mom's house. It's very interesting. We've done research on mom's house. My mom's house was built on Arapaho, Ute, and Cheyenne land, Native American lands. And the Wisdom Keepers had I'm forgetting the term now. It's called something like um, a meeting pole or a center pole where the Wisdom Keepers would come and pray. And I had just learned in the last year that there was a massacre there, which I think is really interesting on this land. And not that there's been harmful spirits or anything that I would say was scary at mom's house necessarily, but this has been quite a while ago. This had to be, gosh, 21 years ago. I had to think of how old my youngest daughter was. And we lived in Wyoming at the time. So we came to visit for Thanksgiving. And I have to tell you first that my cousin's son, this kid who's a country kid, does not believe in any of this kind of conversation at all, had spent the night in mom's guest room downstairs, which is just notorious for having weird things happen.
Mm.
So he didn't say anything to us. He had spent the night there the night before, and then my family came and we were spending, he went and spent the night a couple blocks away at my grandpa's house. So my family could all stay there together. And we go to bed, and I was sleeping on a trundle bed with my daughter. I was on the top, and then it rolled out, and she was on the little bottom trundle. And at one point, I woke up and I thought she was standing at the end of my bed.
Mm.
And I'm like, honey, what do you want? And I say that out loud. And then little Haley beside me moves. And then I'm like, oh crap. And then, like the worst mom ever, I run out of the room
Yes,
and
yes,
leave
yeah.
her there, which is terrible. I hate to say that. That's a terrible mother moment.
Mm.
But my daughter and my cousin's daughter were in the other room, in the living room, watching a movie. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you guys, you won't believe what I saw. And, they're all, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to go back into Haley. And I go back in and I'm just praying and praying, just like, protect us. I was scared at that point because I was just like, okay, I don't know what this is. I just want my daughter and I to be protected. And I could have gotten up and left the room. I think, how funny I stayed. We stayed. And at some point, a couple hours later, I woke up and she was standing there again. And I was just like, oh my gosh. Well, here's the story though, Joe. The next morning, my cousin and everybody comes back over, and we're all sitting around the breakfast table. And her son says to us, as we're all sitting there, he's like, you guys, I just got to tell you. He said, I had the weirdest experience when I slept in that room. It's like, I woke up and there was like this little girl standing at the end of the bed. And we
Wow.
all just lost it. We were all just like, oh my God, because
Hmm.
we all three had these, even though my daughter and my cousin's daughter didn't see the little girl in that moment. My oldest daughter saw her and experienced her several times after that at mom's house.
Right.
And so to have it validated by someone who was an absolute non-believer, did not experience things like that,
Wow.
it was this awesome moment of like, okay, once again, you can't make this stuff up. Like, this is real. This has happened. And
Yeah.
stuff has happened at that house. And mom hates it. She's like, don't tell people my house is haunted.
They don't want to
you
come
know,
come visit.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, but you know what? It validates exactly what we're saying. And I guess this is the big thing that I've been big on with this show since I started it is, I believe, and I will say this too, I get a lot of people I've talked to who had an NDE, a near death experience, and it was like 30 years before they talked about it. 40 years before they talked about it. Um, and one of the big things I'd start asking them, even off the air, is why'd you wait so long? And it's a very complex answer usually. One of them is it's a very personal thing. Even though they believe 100% without a shadow of a doubt that it happened and that they now know who we truly are at our core. They didn't think, well, I need to tell everyone. They will figure this out in their time when it's their time to figure it out. Another answer I will get is the fear of what people will think of them. Like, especially you go back even 20 years ago, 25 years ago,
Totally.
it could be career massacre. Like it could just depending what you do, you could lose your job, you could lose your family, spouses, all that kind of stuff. So, I guess me always being someone just completely fascinated with the other side, I'm always just like, just bring it on. I want to hear about it. But it is a very personal thing for people. And I think the more we talk about it, the more normalized we make it. And the audience, even the audience that's soul inspired listening, your audience listening, whoever's listening, can say to themselves, okay, I can validate my experience then. Maybe it's something I need to bring out because I also feel there's a healing piece to that because it's something they're holding on to and not even like letting anyone know. Like this is something we need to understand, right? And we are at a pivotal point right now where, you know, I truly believe it. I don't know why I feel this way, but I really feel it's not like 100 years from now. There's gonna be a lot change in that time, but I feel even in the next 5, 10 years, it's we're moving so quick. Time is moving so quick that we're gonna have a different understanding of who we are.
Yes. Yes. 100%. And it makes me think of a friend of mine, Steve Farrell, who he and Neil Donald Walsh actually formed a nonprofit called Humanities Team. And that's where my first film is playing right now. If people go to humanitiesstreamplus.org or just humanitiesteam.org, it's called When Sparks Ignite. And I'm just telling you that Steve, his whole mission in this humanities team is to have pervasive consciousness by 2040, people living at this higher realm. And he and I would get into these conversations, and I would say, Steve, it's going to be way before that. Like we are already at the tipping point, and I've talked to so many people who are like, the tipping point's already happened. We just can't see it yet because
Right.
we're so our lens of how we're experiencing reality is so clouded and conditioned.
Mm-hmm.
And so part of what we're doing right now is trying to break that conditioning. And
Right.
and I really do love that because you and I are so in alignment with that. I feel like that is a huge purpose for me, is to be the paradigm buster of some of the old false narrative,
Mm.
like that we have to suffer to heal or to grow, that we have to go through all these hard times in order to grow. I don't believe that. I think we can start forming a new narrative.
Mm-hmm.
And it really is about choosing to live in a conscious life where we're not allowing the distractions to take us.
Mm.
We're literally allowing ourselves to be in alignment. And I think as we continue those practices, it's wiping off the lens. It's going to continue to clear that lens. And I feel like that's why on that film poster, there's 3 words, and it says, your period healing period matters, period.
Mm.
And for me, that's what it is, because each one of us are these golden threads in the tapestry of humanity. And so as we heal, we become then the conduit for that love and healing connection to come to us and through us as us. And
Mm-hmm.
that to me is what's going to make the shift.
Absolutely. And I also, and to touch on that, and just to jump with that too, is that I believe it's a bit of a slow drip rather than a faucet. Like we're getting pieces. I can recall, I don't know how many months ago it was now. I guess it was last year when the big drone situation in New Jersey. I'm sure you recall that all these drones were out. And I became fascinated with it, not because of the what it was. I immediately felt like those things are just technology we have not been shown. And I won't get deep into that, but I knew it wasn't from somewhere else. But what did happen, I mean, that's what I felt. But what did happen was it started putting people's eyes to the sky. And I started kind of getting just down the rabbit hole. And I don't even use TikTok and all these things, but I got down this rabbit hole of wanting to see these videos of people getting these drones on video. So I'm watching them. And then what was fascinating is then I started seeing people saying, oh, wait a second, what's that thing? And they'd zoom in and there's an orb in the sky. And then they would say, well, look at this thing. It's like pulsating. What is that? And then the next video, same thing. Next video, same thing. And I'm seeing all these people videoing orbs, these glowing balls of energy in the sky that they normally wouldn't have seen because they weren't looking to the skies. They were looking down in their home on their TV. They weren't looking to the
Mhm.
skies. And did that have anything to do with the drones? I really don't know. I don't know. What I do know is that there was attention brought to something and then it started igniting. And I was just like blown away. I was talking to a few of my friends that are into this stuff. And I said, are you seeing this? And they're like, wow, yeah, yeah, yeah. But then I would bring it up with other people and they'd be like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And I'm like, wow, how do you
Oh,
not
that's
know?
interesting.
How do you not know this? Where am I? Which timeline am I on? Because these aren't even my videos. These are other people's.
Yeah, yeah.
And then some people would say, oh, it's probably all AI. I'm like, there's no way. That's not, I mean, I understand there is a place where AI is happening, it's existing. But this is something that has been occurring. It's been happening forever. And I think there's a thinning happening. And the more awareness that we become, the more awareness that we have, it's going to become less of a shock as things start to kind of move into whatever we are. And I think it's ignorant. I'm getting passionate here. My hands are going. This is the have
I
to
love
just.
it.
It's ignorant for us to think that we have it all figured out. That we are already at our. That's it. Because if that's it, what's the point? Like there's more coming. Like we keep evolving. I would much
Hmm.
rather sound a little bit like a lunatic to have an idea of what is than to completely stomp on what could be. Like it makes no sense for me to just sit back and be like, okay, this is what we're doing. I feel something bigger is coming. Everybody's feeling it. Not everybody's talking about it, but everybody's feeling it. And I wanted to bring that up. I didn't know if you want to give your 2 cents on that, but that's something I just wanted to talk about.
No, that's great.
Yeah.
That's so great. And um I when you said the veil is thinning, that is absolutely the truth. And from the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people that I've interviewed over the last 8 years, that is, what I have continued to hear and then heard in, as you were saying, it's like things are being expedited, things are speeding up. The knowledge is coming quicker and quicker, the experiences, things are expanding, more and more people are having these kind of 5D experiences. So I think it's really happening. And I love the connection when you were talking about the orbs for me. What immediately came into my mind was a little over 3 years ago, or excuse me, under 3 years ago. It'll be 3 years this January. My father had passed away in December, and I was interviewing Marcia Fries, who is her book is called American Psychic. And she's this incredible woman who was born psychic and at one point gave up a Hollywood career as an actress. She was on Married with Children as a guest, but she was regular on Everybody Loves Raymond. I mean, people would recognize her.
Mm-hmm.
She's just really a cool woman. And she wrote this book and she started working with the FBI. She started working with the LAPD and solving cold case murders.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she took her gift and has been utilizing it in beautiful ways of serving humanity. Well, I'm interviewing her. Um, and I had met her before when I interviewed her for that book. And I was interviewing her. I can't remember if she had a new book coming out or there was a reason that we were doing a second interview. But as we're talking, she says, "Oh, your dad's here." And right as she says that, this orb goes across the screen. I have it on video at minute
Mm-hmm.
26.
Yeah.
And it doesn't go up or down, it doesn't go diagonal. It literally does this kind of loop pattern.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then she's like, "Did you see that?" And then we both start laughing. I'm like, "You could not have missed it."
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
and my father, as an energy source, whoa, did he come to me right before he passed and right afterwards? And, you know, um, when I knew my brother shared with me, he'd had a stroke. And he was in a coma for several days right before he died. And there was 12 days altogether. Every night I dreamt about him. He came to me in my dreams. and they
Hmm.
were very benign. I mean, it was so funny because it wasn't like some big deep revelation. Sometimes we'd be playing cribbage, which is the card game he taught me as a child.
Yeah.
Um, but what was more fascinating, and my partner at the time, he and I were like, "What is going on?" Because actually, that lamp behind me, and it still does it every so often, so it's really fascinating. I always just go, "Hi, Dad." Um, these lamps aren't even a year old, and especially at that point, I mean, they weren't even a year old at that time. And so they were fairly new and the light would just flicker. More than
Hmm.
that, though, our stove, our brand new stove, all of a sudden the digital clock would change time. All of a sudden, it had never done it before and didn't do it afterwards. It did it for about a week. The date would change, the time would change, and then we'd be walking through the kitchen and automatically the dishwasher would come on.
Yeah.
And so,
Right.
I mean, these things, kept happening.
Hmm.
And then again, so much so, um, it was about a year later, I had buried some of Dad's ashes in the backyard. I had wanted to do something special with them. So I put them under some beautiful flowers. I had this little windmill in the backyard. My father grew up on a wheat farm. A windmill was a big sign for him. And it was really just this special. I prayed, lit a candle, did all these things. Well, the very next day, my brother came to stay with me, and as he's sitting in the living room with me, and my parents, my mom and stepdad were there as well as Steve's son, we're all sitting there talking, and all of a sudden my doorbell, which I had had people over to work on, did not work. It had not worked for the 5 years I lived in that house, just is stuck on. It just goes ding, and it's not shutting off. It's just on.
Right.
And I just look at my brother and I start laughing. And so Steve goes over and he goes outside and he hits it. So then it goes dong, never works again after that.
Wow.
And then Steve and I are talking about all this, my brother and I, that night, and the light starts doing its thing. And so I'm
Hmm.
talking, I'm like, Steve, this is so funny. Well, that night, my brother has his first dream about Dad. And he goes, Steph, this was so wild. The next day, he said, Dad showed up and he goes, and it was just like I was awake. Like it was totally this room, and Dad's just walking in. And Dad says, Yes, this is real. I just want you to know, I'm okay. Everything's all right. And then he said it was really interesting because my father was really spiritual. He was like a spiritual pilgrim. He went to like Fatima and Lourdes and Medjugorje, all these different places, very spiritual places. And he came in, and Steve said he had holes in each of his hands. And he said, You can touch them. There was no blood, there was no anything. And Steve said he said this totally non religiously, but Dad said to him, We're all one in Christ. And Steve's like, I really believe he was talking about not how people say Jesus, but like Christ consciousness, that
Consciousness.
collective consciousness.
Right.
And, it's so that was such an incredible moment. And Joe, I guess, those are the kind of things that to me, having a whole family there experiencing that moment,
Hmm.
um, having these dreams and having these things happen. And when we can start looking at them as blessings, and as you said earlier, if we can just start inviting that experience in, I think part of it is really having a sacred yes, not being in fear. And you can do, I have so many friends that are like, you do protections. You can do protections and say only what is good and pure and beautiful is welcomed here.
Hmm.
And really hold that vibration so you don't have to be afraid. Because really, what a blessing that we're able to get these glimpses now. I call it like the glimpse
Yeah.
behind the curtain at Oz.
Hmm. No, it is. It's beautiful. Thanks for sharing that. That's a really fascinating story. And a lot of times, like you talk about energy, I've had a couple recent episodes where people who had NDEs, they realize that they're this energetic being. Um, they do like lose the suit. We lose the suit. The suit is it's like getting into a car, and sometimes the car works well for a long time, and sometimes it doesn't work as well. And when we leave the suit, we're this energy. And if you really think about how our energetic family, our the higher self, how they gonna interact with us? Well, energy. And there's so much energy flying through what we have. Lights. That's probably the easiest form. And I wanted to talk and focus a little bit about your book because I'm looking at the fact that you've been doing these books I'm a musician. Age 11, I started writing songs. I would pick up my guitar and just start playing chords, and I would start singing words, and I didn't know what I was singing. And I thought that's how you wrote songs. No one taught me how to write a song. So because I didn't know how to write a song, I just did that. And people would say, "Well, where did that come from?" And I'd say, "What do you mean?" I would just play the chords, sing the songs. And up until this day, that's how I write all my songs. It's my tapping into something bigger or higher. And it's been this show that has awakened me to understanding how truly magical that is. I don't think I was giving not myself credit, but my higher self or my connection to something as much
Mm-hmm.
credit for bringing those messages through. I loved doing music, but I never pushed my music because I would get lucky and some things would happen and I'd be like, oh my God, my claim to fame. But these were moments that were so personal to me that I was scared to bring it to the outside world. This was like my music because it kept me grounded. And for writers like yourself, conversation, Diamond, watch the conversations with God and the way you're writing in six, I think you said 6 weeks. It's like a download, right? And
100%. Yeah.
and one thing that if I could bring to anyone listening to this show is that I want to hear about your book a little bit, but I also want your just any input you have on how people can tap into that. Like how can they find that space? Because mine's with music and I'm
Mm-hmm.
trying to get a little deeper with meditation and things and stillness, but I'm trying to just from other people, what is something they could be doing?
Yeah. I think it really begins with putting your devices down, putting the
Right.
screens away. I'm not kidding.
Yeah.
And for me, nature is a big conduit. Nature, I think, speaks to our souls, and it's really getting out of our minds and into our souls. And it can be the simplest of practice, but it's being quiet. I don't care if you do it 10 minutes when you wake up. It's sitting there and having that intention. I think intention's really powerful. So you go, I have an entire room dedicated to meditation and spirituality for me. And I go in there in the morning and I light a candle. And it's like I'm surrounded by things. Some of them are paintings my kids did, or some of them are just things I've collected over the years in different countries. And some of them are seashells from the ocean. It's just these different things that are sacred to me. But I drop into that space. And so it can be as easily accessible as our breath. I would invite people, a great way. And I practiced with a group for about 4 years, a meditation group out of Seattle. And we would meet online every Tuesday and, we'd meditate for an hour and a half. You don't have to meditate that long. But I think what we did in that meditation group that was so powerful is we would take, if you know what friction breath is, like when you're doing yoga, it's kind of like if you're trying to fog up a mirror and you're like, it's kind of but
Mm-hmm.
you do it with your mouth closed. Okay. So you're doing that kind of breath through your nose. Some people call it the breath of fire.
Mm-hmm.
But as you're doing that friction breathing, you're bringing all of your attention first to your third eye and you're just breathing into that space. And then you drop it into your heart and then you're breathing there. And so the practice that we would do was really breathing that friction breath and bringing all that attention into all of our chakras and really connecting at the roof, if you will, the top of our head, 6 inches up, and then going up, 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 up. And sometimes you feel a click. Sometimes you just feel warmth, or you start seeing light, even though your eyes are closed, starts coming in.
Mm-hmm.
And it really, I think if we just start opening up to allowing that, it's right there. It's right there for us. We don't have to work hard. It's being open. It's being open to it and saying, I'm going to devote this time because this is important for me. I want my soul to expand. I want to come to every morning, just like you said, not as the expert. I don't want to be like, oh, I've got it all figured out. Like in Buddhism, there's a story where the master says, don't come. You won't learn anything with the expert mind. You have to come with a child's mind, with that sense of curiosity, and wonder and like, oh, what's here? What's this? And that we
Mm-hmm.
have every single one of us. Nobody's exempt. Nobody's exempt because who we are at our essence is that spark, is that energy. So it really is us. You can call it your higher self, you can call it the divine, the universe, whatever that is. But you're just saying, okay, I'm going to allow my senses, I'm going to bring my attention into alignment so I can access that again to me and through me as me.
Wow. I love that. And I love something spoke to me right there. And it was to be childlike in the sense of you're learning a new tool. I mean, when people are talking to me, I'm very visual and I just go it just keeps going and I'm like, hey, calm down. I need to organize one thing at a time. But one thing that was coming to me was when you said put the devices down and I kind of snickered because I only snicker because it's very difficult. The world
Hmm.
has been created around that device now. And what's happening is I'm thinking to myself, when I was 11, there was no device. Like it was, I don't know what it was. It was like a little phone with a little snake game on it. It wasn't anything. There was nothing like what we have now. It wasn't a smartphone. And I was able to tap into something at a very young age without that distraction. There was other
Yeah.
distractions, but our devices are a very big distraction. As I say this on a podcast, I want people to listen. But if you're going to
Yeah, of
distract
course.
your mind with beautiful things because it'll teach you things, right?
Exactly.
And that's why I think we're moving in the right direction in that sense. But it is something we need to take serious and to be childlike, to approach it and not think that we are going to be the master of it. That's beautiful. That's something that's a lesson for me. That's a lesson for me.
Mm.
Did you write all this in the book or what is the book
Yeah,
is that kind of the synopsis of your book? Is it like really around the like is it about improving our lives? And
absolutely.
okay.
Yeah. At the end of every chapter, I actually have take a moment at the end of every chapter, and there's specific exercises and meditations, journaling exercises, ways that you can assimilate what I'm writing about. Like you'll learn something and like, wow, how might I start connecting with someone that's passed? Or how might I, one of the chapters is growing through grief. Because I think we can't address that. Having a big, fat, juicy life isn't about just being happy all the time. It's about embracing the darkness or embracing the anger or the fear or the sadness. And it's only through befriending those parts of us and holding it all, in this beautiful sacred container that then it's like, God, life just transforms and it does
Mhm.
become juicy. That's it because we're loving whatever shows up. Just like I invite everyone to check out Rumi's poem, The Guest House. He's a 13th century Sufi poet. And that poem really is here's the worst debauch of it. But the beginning of it is, this life is a guest house. This being human, I think he says, is a guest house. Every day a new arrival comes. Some meanness, some sadness, some depression. Meet them at the door laughing because you don't know which has been sent as a guide from beyond. Now
Mm,
I'm eliminating a lot that's in the middle
right.
there that's beautiful and precious, but that's the essence of his message. And I think that's the game changer for us. When we can start befriending this whole experience. And what it does then is it helps reel us into the present moment. You know, that's the big piece. When we're not distracted, when we're not going, oh, the what if game, what might happen in the future, and getting into anxiety or ruminating about the past, we can be here. And this is the portal. This is
Hmm.
the access point right here. The
Hmm.
point of power is in the present moment.
Wow. I love that. And I can definitely align with you with this growing through grief moment. It really stuck out to me because one of the biggest things that I'm hoping to bring, and I believe other leaders in this field that are working with near-death experiences and things like this, I'm trying to help people eliminate the fear of death because death isn't what we think. And if we eliminate the fear of death, death is one of the biggest fears you have. Everything revolves around it. If you really think about it, fear of losing your job, fear of being able to eat, fear of survival, fear of death, fear of like you can go down a road and it all leads to this ultimate fear of existence or who we are. Imagine a world where we lose that fear and we learn to live our life at the fullest. To me, that's heaven, right?
That's
Because
it.
because
That's
now
it.
now there's nothing that can destroy you. You're living your life, you are growing, you're helping, and there's got to be this ultimate space that we can get to like that. There's just gotta be. Like, I'm the optimist guy, but I'm telling you, like, I can feel it's there,
Yep.
but for some reason we have to go through the mud in order to get there. My
And that's
hope,
okay.
yeah, and that's
Yeah.
okay. I truly hope that we can go in the mud and jump out instead of staying in the mud
Yeah.
too long because it's hard
Yeah.
and a lot of people are suffering and it's difficult for a lot of people. But that growing through grief, you almost, the way you said that, it almost feels like a celebration of like you're grieving, right? Because we're human. We're gonna have the grief process. But how much will that change if we can get to understand who we truly are more? That grieving process wouldn't be so hard
Right. Right.
over time. And I guess that's where I'm trying to go with it. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that when we befriend grief, it's nothing to fear. It becomes actually it's a part of our human 3D experience, and that there can actually be, it's interesting that a duality is created where we can actually experience moments of awe or wonder or joy
Mm,
even though we are grieving.
mm.
And that's the power of befriending it. Because if we're just resisting it and pushing it down, there's no room for anything else. And it is like pushing that beach ball underwater, and then it gets enough resistance and just smacks us in the face,
Right.
and something happens. And I think it really is around, embracing what's here in this moment, what's here in this moment.
Hmm. Your book, everything you do, where can people find you?
Oh, thank you. They can go to my website, which is stephaniejames.world. So stephaniejames.world. They can see a trailer to my recent film. I have a new film series I'm working on, the Becoming Fierce series. My books are there, my events. Um, all they can find out just all about it. They can contact me, and yeah, I'm happy to talk to anyone.
I love that. I'll put that in the show notes. And the last question I leave everybody off with is if there is this afterlife, if there is this other place, and here we are, why do we come here and do this? If that exists, what is the main drive and purpose as to why we come here? Just could be a one sentence thing, but just anything that comes to you.
Well, it's interesting because I had a dream about this as I was writing the book, and I write about it in the ending chapter. And it's so interesting because as I was having the dream, you know how you have like that lucid dreaming where you're conscious of dreaming. So I'm like the
Mm-hmm.
secondary observer as this is all happening. And so I was laughing at how it was like this message from the universe. And I was laughing at how, that we truly come from one source, and how funny it is that we experience ourselves as individuals. I'm putting air quotes up here because we're all part of this universal body, just like we have trillions of cells within us that comprise us, that we really are just one source, and that we're coming here and experiencing this really interesting duality, but we're all part of that one source. And that the other piece is, I think that, it's there's something, and I've debated this with friends that go, well, if we're so evolved already, then why do we experience this?
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's part of that beautiful free will. That's part of that spirit that is us. That maybe one of the cells of source says, yeah, I want, there are lessons to learn. There are things here to experience. And honestly, I've had psychics and different people say, your soul just keeps choosing to come back to earth. Like, you don't need to, you don't have to, but you love this world so
Right.
much that you just keep showing up. And
Mm.
so, I think that that energy that is us, that it continues. And so maybe we do have some choice, maybe we do have some choice about coming here and experiencing this duality again, so that we can relearn that we really are all a part of that one universal body.
I love that. I love the way you answered that. I've had similar answers, similar. You say it in a different way, but it does bring us all kind of back to that kind of learning itself. It's kind of, we're coming here to kind of learn about itself and come back to one, right? So beautiful. This has been amazing. So much. Thank you so much, Stephanie, for coming on and sharing everything you've shared. It was a really deep dive, and I appreciate it. I always say to the Soul Inspired audience, please continue to like, share, and subscribe to the show. If you know someone that this show would benefit, please share it with them as well. And I just want to thank you so much again, Stephanie, for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. This was so much fun. I love that. You're a great host, Joe. This was
Thank you.
awesome.
Thank you so much.
So